Welcome to the Geostrategic Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for watching or listening to us today. Is the Baltic Sea about to become the next flashpoint between Russia and NATO? After fresh warnings from senior Kremlin official Nikolai Patrushev, tensions in northern Europe are rising fast. Moscow says attempts to restrict its maritime trade could trigger a naval response, while NATO ramps up patrols and monitoring operations in the Baltic. Is this strategic signaling, or the early stages of a real confrontation at sea? In the next few minutes, we'll break down what was said, what it means legally and militarily, and whether this could escalate beyond political rhetoric. Before we dive in, if you follow global security and geopolitics, hit like, subscribe, and share this video. And most importantly, I want your take. Is this deterrence, or are we drifting toward conflict? Drop your analysis in the comments. Serious debate encouraged. I'll get into it.
We are definitely drifting. I think that's the right word. The news coming out of Moscow suggests we're in some very uncharted waters here.
Okay, so let's get right into the details then. The headlines are all about this warning from Nikolai Patrushev. I think we need to pause right there, actually. For a lot of people, that name might just, blend in. But he isn't just some guy in the Kremlin, is he? Why does it matter that it's him saying this?
Well, that's the first critical signal, isn't it? Patrushev is not a diplomat. He's not a spokesperson. His background is head of the FSB.
The successor to the KGB.
Exactly. And secretary of the Security Council for years. He is what we call a Silovik, a man from the security services. He's an assistant to the president now, but his voice carries immense weight.
So when he speaks, it's the hard power apparatus of the state talking.
Precisely. It's not about negotiation. It's about threat perception, national survival. So for him to be the one commenting on maritime trade that elevates this, it's not an economic dispute anymore. It's a national security priority.
And the language he used, it certainly matches that intensity. The last updates are all flagging this phrase, possible maritime blockade. Now, that word blockade, that feels very, very heavy. It sounds less like a trade issue and more like, well, a precursor to war.
You're hitting on the most dangerous part of this. In international law, a blockade is an act of war. It's a belligerent act.
Right.
So by using that specific word, Patrushev is deliberately raising the stakes. He is saying the Russian Navy could be used to break what they're choosing to call a blockade. He's reframing everything.
But let's look at what's actually happening on the water. Is there a physical blockade? Are NATO ships lined up stopping traffic?
No, not at all. And this is where we have to separate the Kremlin's narrative from the operational reality. There's no traditional blockade. What Patrushev is reacting to is the effort by European states to police the so-called shadow fleet.
The shadow fleet? Okay, we hear this term all the time now. It sounds like something out of a spy novel. Can you break down what we're actually talking about?
It's basically a massive parallel logistics network. We're talking hundreds of aging vessels, mostly oil tankers.
Right.
And Russia uses them to get around Western sanctions, specifically the G7 price cap on their oil. It's how they keep the money flowing for the war effort.
So these are the getaway cars for Russian oil.
That's a great way to put it. But they're getaway cars that are, 20 years old and barely roadworthy. The key thing is they operate outside the normal maritime system.
House.
They use these incredibly opaque ownership structures, shell companies within shell companies. But the critical part, the part that really matters here, is they lack proper, reputable insurance.
And that's the wedge issue. Because if you're, say, Denmark or Sweden, and one of these rust buckets is sailing past your coast with millions of gallons of crude and no insurance for a potential spill, that's a nightmare.
An environmental catastrophe waiting to happen. And that's the Western position. Based on the recent info, they're saying this is about safety. They want to inspect these ships, check their paperwork, make sure they're not going to break in half.
But where Europe sees a safety inspection, Patrushev is screaming blockade.
And that is the friction point right there. In these latest updates, he actually calls the shadow fleet a legal fiction.
A legal fiction.
Wow. Yeah. He's saying the West just invented the term to harass legitimate Russian trade. From their perspective, stopping these ships for insurance checks is a violation of the freedom of navigation.
So it's a complete rejection of the Western rules-based order at sea.
Absolutely. And it leads directly to his conclusion. If you stop our ships under this fictional pretext, our Navy might have something to say about it. He's connecting a Coast Guard check directly to a military outcome.
And he didn't just stop there, did he? The news reports mention him hinting at actions against European ships. what would that even look like?
The implication seems to be a kind of tit for tat. It's asymmetric. If you delay our tankers, maybe we start conducting our own safety inspections on your container ships.
Which would create chaos for global shipping.
Total chaos. And think about the insurance rates. The second the Russian Navy starts aggressively hailing Western merchant ships, premiums go through the roof. It's economic warfare without firing a shot.
Which brings us to the big question. Capability. I mean, threats are one thing.
Yeah.
But can Russia actually back this up? Their military has been, let's say, preoccupied.
That is the fascinating contradiction in all this. He's projecting all this confidence. But in the same set of remarks, he admits that Russia's naval forces are under heavy operational strain.
Heavy operational strain. You don't usually admit that while you're trying to sound intimidating.
It's a very rare moment of transparency. It really undercuts the threat, doesn't it? The Russian Navy is stretched thin. They're in the Black Sea. They have nuclear patrols. Escorting hundreds of slow tankers through the Baltic is a massive commitment.
So is it a bluff? Is he just hoping the threat is enough to make Europe back off?
It has all the hallmarks of brinkmanship. He's trying to change the risk calculus. He wants a Danish admiral to pause and think, is checking this one tanker really worth a potential skirmish? If he creates that hesitation, he wins.
But that only works if the other side blinks. So what is the view from across the Baltic? Is NATO backing down?
Oh, not at all. The reaction has been the complete opposite. The info we're seeing says NATO states are maintaining dense naval and air surveillance activity.
Dense surveillance. It sounds like there isn't much open water left to hide in.
There isn't. And remember, the whole map has changed. With Sweden and Finland in NATO, the Baltic is effectively a NATO lake.
Right. So Russia feels encircled because, well, they are, geographically.
Correct. And Patrushev says as much. He accuses NATO of building an offensive military grouping on their borders. So you have these totally different realities in the same small sea. NATO sees itself enforcing the law. Russia sees a noose tightening.
And there's that crowded room analogy. You've got NATO warships, Russian tankers, commercial traffic, ferries.
Yeah.
Everyone is bumping elbows.
Exactly. The real danger here might not be a planned invasion. It's an accident, a miscalculation. A Russian jet flying a little too close to a surveillance plane. Patrushev's warning just lowers the threshold for what's considered aggression, and that makes any accident much harder to de-escalate.
So let's pull on that thread. The so what of all this. Why does this specific warning matter so much right now?
It matters because it militarizes a regulatory dispute. For so long, sanctions were something bankers did. It was sterile. It happened on a screen. Patrushev is dragging sanctions enforcement into the physical world. He's putting a gun on the table during a trade argument.
It changes the entire game for every Coast Guard commander in the region.
It absolutely does. It forces the West to decide how much this is really worth to them. But the Europeans, I mean, looking at the environmental risk alone, they might feel they have no choice but to act.
And you can't ignore the desperation either. For Russia, this is about keeping the war machine funded.
That's the engine driving all of this. That oil money is the economic lung of the Russian state right now. If NATO successfully clamps down on it, Russia suffocates. So of course the rhetoric is sharp. They see it as an existential threat.
Okay, so looking ahead, what are the indicators we should be watching for?
Watch the Danish Straits. That's the choke point. If we see Danish authorities physically stop a tanker, then we watch the Russian reaction. Is it a diplomatic note or is it a frigate?
And I imagine the commercial side, too.
Absolutely. Watch the maritime insurance markets. If they start pulling coverage for the Baltic because the risk is too high, Patrushev has won without even deploying a ship.
It's just amazing how the Baltic has transformed. It used to be this quiet corner of the world. Now it's a laboratory for modern hybrid conflict.
It is. It's where legal warfare, economic warfare, and old-fashioned hard power all collide. It's the most complex maritime security environment in the world right now.
And I just keep coming back to that phrase, operational strain. It feels like the wild card. The strained military is a dangerous one, isn't it?
Historically, yes. Tired crews, overstretched commanders. That's a recipe for mistakes. If they feel cornered and don't have the resources for a measured response, they might lash out just to prove they still can.
Okay, so to recap, we've got a sharp escalation from Moscow, a dispute over the Shadow Fleet, and a threat of military response, even though they admit their navy is stretched. Meanwhile, NATO is watching everything. A very crowded, very tense room.
That's a very good summary of a very messy situation.
And here's the thought I want to leave you with. We always talk about off-ramps and de-escalation. But think about this. If a European nation detains a tanker for lacking insurance, a standard, boring, bureaucratic procedure, and Moscow, under this new doctrine, calls that an act of war, Do we even have a mechanism for that? Or does a bureaucratic check on a Tuesday morning become a naval skirmish by Tuesday afternoon? It's a real question of whether our diplomatic safety valves can even work fast enough anymore. That's it for this deep dive. Thank you so much for listening or watching. We hope this helped clarify the signal from the noise in the Baltic. If you found this valuable, please check out the other podcasts in our network. We bring the same level of analysis to everything from technology to history. Until next time, stay curious and stay informed.
Goodbye, everyone.
Take care.